IT staff are constantly being asked, even demanded for more. More access, more applications, more storage, faster computers, faster internet, faster response. How can we provide these services within the established boundaries to keep the data safe, the infrastructure secure, and the budget reasonable? This panel will address how they handle some of these issues and collaborate with other staff to be proactive and stay secure. We encourage an open format. They will present a case study on each topic, and then we will open it up for questions. We have with us today Jane Alexander, the Chief Information Officer from the Cleveland Museum of Art. Brian Dawson, Chief Digital Officer from Canadian Science and Technology Museum Corporation. Yvel Guelcé, Director of Infrastructure Technology at the Children's Museum of Indianapolis. And I'm Janice Craddock, Director of Information Technology at the Amon Carter Museum of American Art. And I'm also the chair of the IT SIG here at MCN. SIGs are groups within MCN of like-minded folks that gather to discuss common issues. The IT SIG focuses on the management of information and technical services. We share information throughout the year from everything from policies to software and hardware to storage issues, and help each other stay current with emerging technologies and maintain the old ones. So if you're interested in joining the IT SIG, it's as easy as dropping off your business card or picking up one of mine and sending me an email. We would love to have you, and it addresses many of these struggles that they are talking about today. So with that, I'll open up to the first question.
All right, so we're going to have 6 case studies, and the first one I'm going to take is why the cloud for Cleveland Museum of Art's archival repository. So I have now been at Cleveland for 4.5 years, and one of my first projects was we were trying to get our digital asset management system to dynamically pull our online collection, like within this very short time period. So I went down to our photographer who does our ingestion, and I said, while I was talking about something else, I said, what's all that? And he said, oh, those are all our we had spent all this money in 7 years to digitize our collection. He said, oh, well, those are all the high-res TIFFs on gold DVDs. And I was like, what? That's our digital, these are our assets. We just spent a lot of time. I said, what's the deal? What's our plan there? And they said, we just put them on there, and when we need to re-ingest, we pull it from there. So we started to look at many different things. One, you first have to figure out the budget. We were going to do in-house servers, and we put together a cross-collaborative team like we do for all our projects. We really got archives on it, and when we brought archives on it, we thought, let's make this really an archival repository for all the projects we're doing at the museum. So I said, well, let's look at the cloud. And I was told by library and by our application manager, I'd been at the museum for a while, there's no museum doing that. There's all these problems to it. And I said, well, if we don't, this is huge amount of data and it's only getting bigger. We're already at terabytes. What should we do? And I said, there's no in-house maintenance. There's proven expertise that we won't have. We have so many projects going on. We have a building opening, Gallery 1, online collection, catalog and content management system that we're building in-house. Let's give this to the experts, and let's do some best practices. So then they said, well, what about the speed? That's gonna, do you really want to take away for how fast we're doing things? So we were really worried about the lifespan of the data center company that we picked. We wanted to make sure that the security was there. Of course, these were our assets. I did point out that, as much as we have very valuable information we don't want to be hacked, there are other best practices out there with a lot more sensitive information. So we really went through all the different worries, and we then came up with some solutions. And one of the things is we ended up picking a provider that we use, One Community, and they are a world-class local cloud virtual data But the great thing about them is we also had full redundancies. There was 2 stars showing the 2 states were in Ohio and Michigan. So again, we were doing point-to-point connections to a shared ISP. We were on the same backbone. So that was a big decision in getting everybody comfortable with this idea. And then the last problem, the big sort of block, was money. And I said, this is something new. Museums are starting to look into this. Let's be a leader. Let's get someone to partner with us. And if you really are doing something new, you can go to your local sort of providers and see what they want to offer to you. So we actually did a huge 5-year, $600,000 in-kind donation, and that's when we expanded it to include our conservation program. And we are in the middle of still ingesting. We took another year to sort of do the mappings for how we wanted to really be able to, and what administrative system we want to use in able to pull the data easily. So that's our little case study. So we go back to why the cloud for museums repositories. And so, do you have any?
At this point, we pretty much will open it up for any questions and make it a discussion before we move on to the next question.
I've got a question just to get us started. Oh, sorry. I was sort of wondering that in terms of the performance questions, like speed and so forth. Was that an issue? Was that something you had to manage with this?
No, because we were on the same backbone. We share the same ISP. It's been, it's so fast. We haven't noticed there was no problem with that. We've had more of a problem with, as you can imagine, in-house workflow on how to get this all done, and really making sure that we have that we've mapped everything the way that we believe is best practice and that can go forward with what we're doing in the museum.
So go ahead. Do we have a question back there? Go ahead.
So do you keep the data in-house as well and use the cloud as backup, or is it just all together?
Well, the repository is for all our archival information, so we're not it's a method to get it out of house, and there is a redundancy outside, so we're not going to be keeping it. Right now we're in transition. We don't have it. We've done our first set of getting all our images are now up. We have not, burned the gold DVDs, so there's our backup, but eventually the idea would not to have a backup in-house. That sort of our idea was to have a redundancy in another and we did look at cost. We picked another state. Michigan and Ohio are pretty close to each other, so if there's some, world destruction, I don't know how, but that's how we sort of made our decision.
It's interesting. This is an extremely deep and complex topic. I think running a museum is a really expensive business, and just saving money is not always the driver for making a decision like this. I would be kind of like Janice said, I'd be very worried to have somebody else hold the only copy of my digital assets in the same way that our physical assets are maintained with kind of a chain of custody. We're not letting somebody else hold our paintings. We run our warehouse because we know how to do it. We know how to protect it. I'd be very concerned about taking the only copy of my digital asset, even if some company that's been in business for 4 years says that they have geographical redundancy. It would be a
Well, we actually went to both security places. We went and looked at it. We had over 6 months of questions and discussions and tests. And the customers they have, we're this customer to them. They have major customers that they're supporting. And my philosophy is really you gotta look towards the experts for a lot of things. That in-house in a museum, you cannot do everything, and by no means are you going to be doing it better. There is this sense of if it's in-house, we're doing a better idea of protecting it. But we have 2 people total that are our system admin, our security, our storage. They are and they're great, but this is a project all in itself. So it's not. But I did push the museum to let's take this to a best practice. Let's see what businesses are doing and hospitals are doing, and let's go that way.
Did your management have any issues about letting go of the data?
There was
and what were your stumbling blocks?
It's not leadership, because leadership, this is not something they like to, they just want to know it's taken care of and it's good. It's more the people who, the head of conservation, the head of registrar, the head of archival. They're the ones who had the most concerns. So they were they met with the waiting room, and I will tell you, everyone said no to the cloud. And then I said, all right, well, I'm going to bring in 2 local, because I'd been on the other side of I'd been in museums, but I'd also been a consultant. I said, let's bring 2 people in. We all still say no. We'll refigure this out. And they had a list of questions like you can't believe, and we did a lot of tests. Oh, we did do tests before we agreed to anything, and we looked at different platforms, and the group came back and said okay, and they actually said, I actually started to think it wasn't going to work, and they said okay, we want it, but this is, now that we're doing this bigger project, it's going to be hugely expensive for 5 years. So then I took it back on to do a partnership.
Did you have a partner?
What are the file sizes that you're dealing with? Like, what's your kind of average file size for your assets?
For an individual, like for a high-res TIFF.
Right, so yes, bigger, maybe.
Yeah, I don't, so now I knew, like, just as I was talking, like, where are all our numbers, but we're in, I don't have a number exactly, but I can look that up.
Well, do you need to, you don't have to use any kind of, like, managed file transfer kind of things?
Oh, yeah.
You are?
Oh, not to speed. We use different management tools to have it automatically. So there's a whole system in how we pull things in and how we tag them and how we map them. But it's sort of this back end process going on while we're doing everything else. And because we're on this one community is this huge broadband network. This huge network. We're never taking advantage of the amount of access we have. So it's not, and because it's a direct link, it's not. We have no problems with speed. But it's a continuous process, and the only thing slowing it down is not the speed of the technology, is the workflow and the manpower of getting certain things, making decisions, and going to the next step. Because what we're doing with everything is we've broken it up into steps, and then we're checking each. There's different areas that we then go back and make sure we're getting it the same way, and people can pull it the same way they want. And do we need to make alterations at that point?
Did you move other services to the cloud prior to this?
No, this was our big, we're using 365, the cloud is such a, bigger, but this was our big, like, let's put our information solely in this sort of.
Did you leverage your experience with Office 365 to sell it internally then, assuming it was a good experience?
No, because we're doing that now.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah. We just switched everything over, and we're doing that for cost, actually, and that was it. Yeah.
See, I think that's very brave, because the way I look at it, 365 itself is just on the cloud only. You don't have a local copy of it, where archival, you actually have a copy of it on site and one not there. So you're taking much risk with your email than you're doing with your archival in some sense.
Yes, but we keep we are. But we again, that one was actually an easier switch, and we do have we have a method in place for all our, depending on where you are leadership level in the museum, how often your mail is archived. That's part of then this archival repository. So we do have a redundancy of other stuff. We could possibly, if there was a major problem, we could. I don't feel like we're at risk, but anything is possible.
Peter?
Sort of back to what she asked earlier, kind of a more technical issues. If you're serving up large files, 200, 300, 400 megabyte TIFF files someone has to look at.
Yeah.
I don't see how that could possibly be as quick from the cloud, no matter that you're on the same ISP, as it would be serving up locally. So I'm just curious, did you have to up your bandwidth, or what is the bandwidth you're getting? Even an ISP has maybe an unlimited bandwidth, but you pay for a limited amount of bandwidth. How can you, what did you have to do to accommodate large files on a daily basis?
This is our archival repository. So we also have a digital asset management that is local. So your daily use of these images are available to people daily. And I mean, I'm telling that they need a copy for publication, not just being able to use them and zoom in on them. And I mean, so this was just our actual holding on the file of the main TIFF that when there was a problem or something had to be ingested again, we have to pull it down.
Just like deep storage.
Yeah. So it's not like we're pulling all these huge TIFF, those are the biggest files. We're not pulling those regularly. Those are just storage.
Stratification of data is a real critical piece of cloud storage. You take huge files that you never need to look at. It's a great place for them. You're taking the files you need every day, or the large files you need every day. So
and that's
you have to analyze your data and split it up.
Yeah. And I'm sorry that I didn't, because in fact, I think my time is over. But but we're supposed to do a sort of overview of what we're doing. But yeah, we have. I mean, our digital asset management system is, on site, and it's also because it pulls dynamically to our wall and our Apple and our app and our digital signage, and we don't want that slowed down. That we put our videos on our DAM system. And they come to best based on the location you're at. So we wanted that to be in house, and so we could it wouldn't slow down depending on you were there. Yeah.
See you again?
And on the second question. So why we changed to iBeacons for the Near You Now function of ArtLens. So to say this really quickly, again, ArtLens is our app. It was part of the Gallery One experience in that it connects wirelessly to our collection wall. So, and it pulls every single thing that's on view. So if it's accession, deaccessioned, in conservation, on loan, it's reflected live in this app. One of the functionalities of ArtLens is Near You Now. And as you walk around the museum, it will, it pops up where you are. See, it says you are here. And then it will show you which content in that gallery is scannable or is part of a tour and things like that. So we initially, when we were opening Gallery One, was really fast. We were also opening the museum. I wanted to do everything with triangulation with our current, with our Cisco, with our APs, and we looked at the diagram, and all the APs have been put in a straight line, which means we would have to go into these brand new galleries, cut holes in the ceiling, and believe it or not, leadership did not back me on that idea. So we were opening very quickly, and we ended up teaming up with Amazon, and we did a hosted solution because they had these, and basically because design people liked it, they had these tiny, sort of the size of a phone nodes that you could put in light tracks, and we could put our canisters around it, and everyone seemed happy. And we opened up, and it seemed to work fairly well. You can see the size of this. This is using the old method. And the only thing is, once we got to budget for the next year, we really kicked that can down the road, because with a hosted solution, you are paying an operating cost, and we were going to be paying like $75,000 a year, which would not really fare well. So I had already talked to Amazon at the beginning. We then brought it in-house, and that seemed to work well. We also made some changes, and at the same time, iOS 8 came out, iPhone 6 came out, the Android version we built, there was all these things going on. We had to go back and look at, we have a augmented reality functionality in our app also, that you hold it up 50 feet away from an object and hotspots pop up to tell you about the object, and hopefully from these hotspots you will then go and look at the artwork closer because you've been brought into it. Everything was breaking, and one of the things we found with the wayfinding issue, the dealing with anything, the iPads, it would take you off the Wi-Fi completely. So we went back, and Amazon, we work with them, and we've just replaced iBeacons. We've just had iBeacons now put throughout every gallery in the museum. The big dot has gone to a teeny little pin-sized dot. It is absolutely the technology is, which 6 months ago I said, the technology's not there. I'm anti-iBeacon. So here I am at a conference later, like, oh, we moved everything to iBeacon. So don't listen to anything I say. Call me up before you do it. And so it was great. We go from 10 meters accuracy to 1 meter. But here's the deal. Our maps were based on our visitor maps, which were not based on the footprint of the building. So our galleries down in the 1916 building that has medieval tiny little galleries, you're 3 galleries over. So the technology is working great. We had to go to design. They had to redo all the maps to match the footprint. We then had to take it back to our developer to sort of load back up into our app, and it's now right in the store. We are hoping for Thanksgiving, holidays through Christmas, every visitor can come and will be wowed. We know technology-wise and from test flight-wise, it's working really great. I'm very excited about it. So, I was just showing that. So this is also the difference in the iBeacon. It's a tiny little, it's this big, it's like a little tiny plug that you can plug right in. Let me just, that doesn't really, I should have had something that showed the, I put it on Twitter if you want to see the real size of it. And people ask, well, where is it located? It's located on the level 1 and level 2. We have about 270 beacons. And this is how we install, as you can see to the right, how easy it is. I mean, to the left, you just install it in the light, plugs right into into the light track. Or we've had to, because we have a lot of casework and to get better accuracy, we have batteries. That was probably the only thing we had to think about, is that you don't want to replace the batteries too often. We went with the one that takes it sort of 365 days, going 7 days a week, and hit those a couple around. And those were about $40. The batteries were about $40. So that was a little bit of a cost that we weighed, but it made the accuracy so much better. To have some of these places that we could hide that there wasn't actually an easy placement to power. So I think that's sort of, I jumped sort of through the story that way, but I will tell you in the next couple of months the results, but I can tell you from all the testing, we're very excited, and it's opened up a whole lot of new ideas in the app, because when you have better accuracy and it's easier to work and it works on multiple devices and iPads aren't being knocked off because of the proprietary, we already are seeing like ability to do much more with what we want to do with the visitor experience. So,
could you talk briefly about the ones that install on the light track?
Yeah.
Who makes them, or
Oh yeah. No, I do know the name, but I can. Anyway, you can send me an email and I'll send you all the stats for it. Yeah. I mean, with Navazon, the iBeacons came already configured, because we built an SDK so that it can work with our app, so that it really, and I highly recommend that. And I don't have enough time to talk about that, but if you have any questions about that, we can do it.
Is the purpose more for wayfinding or to track distance?
So that's great. The purpose of the app is for wayfinding, and our app gets a lot of analytics, but one of the things we knew was that people were listening to videos, and we know that they're favoriting objects, and we know that they're using the augmented reality. We don't know exactly we didn't know really if they were in front of the painting doing all that. We now we're mapped, sort of, we can at any time, any device in the museum, you don't have to be on ArtLens. We can see everybody. It's kind of interesting. It was funny when we were testing, the network administrator knew exactly where I was because he would just open it up and see me testing. So we've mapped them over to sort of get a better picture of the whole experience of ArtLens, but again, we're putting everything in place, what we want to gather, what we want to do with, that's a whole new discussion. But yes, that was a great question, and that it will help us gather that information.
So by going to iBeacon, are you less reliant on your wireless network, your Wi-Fi network?
Well, we still need we don't use for location at all, the wireless. We use it just so you can have wireless.
Okay.
Were you able to get rid of
Yeah, it's all in-house. I mean, we use them because, like for this next round, when we moved Tide Beacons, they, configured it and wrote the SDK that would work with our app. But it's all in-house now that we've paid for all the cost of everything. An implementator, yeah. So we're not paying like for all 270 nodes anymore.
And you're not paying for the dashboard or online.
Yeah, I mean, well, to be perfectly fair, there's some because we're talking about overall analytics and what we want now versus later. We might there was just talks of keeping certain things that we can have access to.
Great.
So,
Let's move on.
Oh, okay. All right. So, let's see if I can get a remote to work here.
Next, yeah.
So next up is, how do we manage the ever increasing challenge of IT risks? And in particular here, one thing that I was particularly sort of interested in exploring with everyone is how do we get buy-in for IT risk management and kind of change the conversation away from kind of what controls we need to be putting in place or saying no and so forth to actually making things happen.
Sorry, can you shift the microphone?
Sure. Does that work a bit better?
he doesn't have quite the booming voice I have.
Okay. So I'm gonna start off by just a little look at what we used to do around threat and risk assessment. We used to have a threat and risk assessment process, or a TRA process, where we would work with our clients to do a statement of sensitivity. So just look at the systems and the information assets that are to be managed, and then based on the criticality and the sensitivity of that information, all the experts, so the IT security and protection services folks would do a TRA, would do an IT TRA exercise to identify the necessary safeguards, and then we would be bringing these back to the project. But effectively, what we were doing was we were setting up a scenario where we were actually imposing constraints on stakeholders as opposed to having those stakeholders feel ownership for the controls that were sort of being brought in. So a question then that's very much on my mind is then how do we shift that discussion from what can go wrong to how are we sort of collaborators in terms of making things happen. And so we recently sort of changed our approach, and so what we've effectively done is the language we use sort of internally was we really modernized our IT security program and made those stakeholders very much invested in the process. And that's kind of a first key point is to really do a risk assessment with the project team. And so our approach has been to actually do an integrated risk assessment we've had the most success where that risk assessment is done. We don't just do an IT risk assessment, but we do an overall risk assessment for a project or initiative, and IT risk is just one of a range of risks that we're assessing with the team. But to make this work then, so we have to have a practical approach for how we sort of define risk and what methodology we're using. So my advice here then would be to keep your risk methodology very, very simple. So this is kind of a classic and a simple sort of kind of definition of risk. You look at the potential impact of a threat and the likelihood of that issue or that threat happening, and from that you can determine risk. There's many more complex ways you can define risk, and you can bring in a lot of variables, but you'll get a lot more traction if you work with a very, very simple definition. And so then we had tools like a simple risk assessment grid, where you sort of have, impact on one axis and likelihood on another, and from that you can come up with a statement of risk that you can then agree to with a project team. So that risk assessment sort of fits within sort of a broader chain within the process, where you have, from a given threat, you do that risk assessment, and from that risk assessment, you get a statement of risk without putting any kind of controls in place. And so then with the team also, you work out what safeguards are needed. And if you put those safeguards in place, what would the residual risk be? So what would the remaining risk be after the controls are put in place? So I'm gonna put that kind of that overall sort of risk formula into kind of a bigger picture process now. So and this comes around to the next key point, which is around ownership of risk. So this is kind of the 5 main stages of the risk management process that we're using now, where you're updating, you're assessing the assets up front and doing your TRA, identifying the safeguards, and then you get into implementation. And again, you're still working as part of the project team for implementing the safeguards, and it's sort of done as part of the overall project. But the last 2 stages here are kind of key, where you to determine whether the safeguards are implemented. You've got it is an expert, like an IT security expert, that would be confirming if certifying whether or not the controls are implemented. But the key step here is that accreditation, that sign off on risk, and it's not IT that owns that, but it's actually the project owner that owns that. So by getting out of IT owning the risk and allowing the project owners to own the risk, it really changes the conversation, and you get a lot more buy-in. And this is just one example here where we actually got traction with this when we brought in a blockbuster exhibition. We brought in the Star Wars Identities exhibition, and did an integrated TRA around that. And that actually having that as a successful case allowed us to get buy-in and allowed us to create a foundation where we were able to change the policy based on a success story and refer back to this as a successful project, a successful way of managing risk for future projects. So so that's kind of the case study in a nutshell. So I can sort of throw it out in terms of how what others sort of successes have been in terms of sort of managing risk and getting buy-in in terms of risk management.
So getting through all the silos at different departments, how engaged were they in that whole process when you tried this at your place?
Well, the one key thing is those upfront stages are done with the project team, and so IT being brought in as part of the project team at an early stage and doing a risk assessment at an early stage. Mm-hmm. So a matrixed team that cuts across silos that helps.
I'm a little confused. I understand sort of an overall risk assessment. What is a risk assessment for a given exhibition, for a given project? What do you look at that's different than what you look at normally?
Yeah, so you can do a risk assessment on different scales. We've actually done, say, a risk assessment on our IT infrastructure overall, but any risk assessment exercise is going to pick a scope, right? And that's a key piece of before you undertake a risk assessment. What are you assessing? What's in scope and what's not in scope? So mounting an exhibition, a new exhibition, can be putting on that exhibition. Say that's what you want to assess to make sure we're putting in whatever appropriate safeguards or managing risk appropriately. You can define that as your scope. One thing I didn't get into is as you're doing these risk assessments, you effectively may have templates. Like if you've done a risk assessment for an exhibition before, you can reuse the assessment and then just sort of tweak what's changed, and it's kind of a shortcut for a team to potentially use. So I'm not sure if I quite answered the question, Peter. I'm
thinking about it.
Okay.
So in that example, and you do this risk analysis for the exhibition, is that just an IT risk, or do you evaluate all kinds of risks while you're in this?
We evaluate all kinds of risks. Risk to reputation and so on. So doing an integrated risk assessment where the IT risk assessment isn't separate from the overall risk assessment allows you to, it allows IT risk to be considered, kind of in balance with the overall project, and for us it helps create buy-in as well.
And was this a directive from management, or is it something that you issued?
It's a bit of a mix. There's our board happens to be quite interested in risk management, and prior to changing up how we're changing up our IT security program with a shift in focus for who owns risk, there wasn't necessarily a solid methodology. The most solid methodology was coming from the IT threat and risk assessments that we used to do. So in a sense, something that we brought to the table was a methodology that helped others manage risk for a project overall, and not exclusively IT risk.
Can you give a specific example from the perspective of IT or an installation, an exhibition installation where IT was a definite consideration in terms of risk?
Well, if I go back to the example that we were looking at with bringing in this blockbuster exhibition, it was there was a serious sort of IT infrastructure that came with this, which was it was all a kind of a turnkey sort of setup, if you will. Like you bring in that exhibition, and it had its own like bank of systems and servers and so forth. And so some of the risks that we explored with the group were just things about, okay, if that system breaks down, what are the channels in terms of rebooting the system, or do staff need to be trained in terms of doing a system reboot? Is that covered in terms of the kind of the contract or the training that we're getting from the people that had built the exhibition? Another example of risk, though, is that system was connected live to X3 studios via the internet, so they also had direct access to the system if there were problems. So again, assessing sort of connectivity questions, and so how are they going to have access, direct remote access from outside and so forth. So things like that might be examples of sort of factors that we assessed. If the link goes down, what's the impact? What's the likelihood of the link going down? So that would be some simple examples.
How it affects your infrastructure, your bandwidth?
It could be. And in this case, since the experience was self-contained, we didn't have a bandwidth issue, but it was more connectivity in terms of doing troubleshooting.
Right. We always look at sort of the base all our processes to sort of make sure all the lights are on, everything kind of can work, and we set up a lot of our projects. I mean, in our big strategies, anything we do now, even with exhibitions, that we can use LogMeIn. There's one way to be trained for no matter what we're doing, so that the people on the weekend and the people in Gallery 1 and the help desk all kind of have when it's because things are changed so fast, it's not like a new training. But then sometimes and I call them calculated risks, when there's some really kind of cool idea that's foreign to how we normally do business. We really look at is this what's the weight, what the chances, a calculated risk in the sense of the upside of this is going to be pretty great, and we'll learn something from it, and then we just sort of put in troubleshooting in case this, how we'll handle it, or we'll know that, maybe there's a chance that on a weekend the video aspect will be off for an hour, and is that okay?
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I ran into an experience like this where we had a show, a rented show in our space, in our museum, where it came in. It was Avatar, actually, to be exact. And it had a lot of technology built into it. And the problem we run into is some of those technologies were not working all the time. And half of the time, we spent more time on the phone trying to get them to work on it. In the same example, they had remote access to it to work on it, to do some of those stuff. And usually we try to make sure that they work on them in the evening or off hours, so our visitors will get to experience whatever was working for the day. But I could see it would be great if we had done a risk analysis or something like this in the beginning to kind of speak to what are the methods to fixing those, and as a result, maybe get some type of reimbursement or discounted on that exhibit, because we spent so much time trying to fix it. I don't think our visitors got enough time to experience the exhibit as it should be.
Are you finding that although in the information technology industry we've used threat assessment for a long time and it's always been part of our projects, are you finding that by using an integrated TRA that you're having more issues with management in terms of more fear of approaching these projects, since this is not necessarily a concept that curatorial staff are used to using?
I think it's probably even more the opposite, if you will. Like by doing the TRA exercise with the project team, they kind of feel like they've got a, how do I put it? They've got a stake in assessing the risk appropriately, if you will. Like the risks don't become something sort of external to be feared, if you will, but they become something that's on the table to manage. So I haven't found so far that it's actually been sowing fear, but it's actually giving people a sense of control.
Great. Shift to the next section.
All right. Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's fine. You can hold on.
No.
What does PCI compliance mean to museum today? Most of us probably don't even know what it is. I'll tell you what it's not. It's not our 1990 portfolios like graphic cards, modems, and sound cards. It's beyond that. In fact, I don't even think we talk about PCI cards anymore. So it stands for payment card industrial. And to go a little bit into more detail on that, which we will cover. So the question is, I am a museum. Who cares, right? And we get that a lot about when it comes to security and things like that. Museums tend to feel like it doesn't apply to them. So I'll try to do a little bit in covering what PCI compliance means and why museums should care about those type of things. So what is PCI compliance? PCI compliance is payment card industrial security standard. It is a set of requirements designed for ensuring that all companies that process cards, store cards, and transmit credit card information maintain a secure environment within their site. To who does it apply? PCI apply to all organizations and merchants, and yes, that would include museum also. Regarding of the size of the organization, it still applies to you. As long as you are dealing with customers' credit card information, whether you are in a transaction or accepting or submitting. In our case, we do this with our ticketing. We take credit cards. We also do it with donor information, membership. So it definitely applies to us, and I'm certain it applies to your museum also. Next question is, if I only accept credit card over the phone, does PCI still apply to me? And yes, that it does. As long as you are taking credit card information, if you are taking it on the phone, chances are you are writing it down or you're taking it to process later. You still need to comply with PCI compliance. Do organizations using third-party processors need to be compliant? Yes. What in this case, you're passing the risk over to this third party, so you need to make sure that they are abiding by these standard. And that's your due diligence, because you have to understand that your customers are giving that information, giving their card information to this third party, which and the way they're thinking is that you are taking that information from them. So whether you are using an online database or you're using like Salesforce, you still need to make sure that before you sign big contract with these big corporations, that they apply with PCI compliance. And some do's and don't as far as PCI compliance. And it's pretty simple, believe it or not. So do some regular monitoring of your network. Would be is where you would start. Do implement and enforce some type of information security for your environment that says what is accepted and not accepted on your network. Do install and keep up-to-date firewall protection. That would also apply to a physical firewall for your internet connection, and also you could go extra step in making sure that like your Windows machines, your desktops, or your PRS systems have firewall installed and good antivirus software. Do assign employees unique IDs. I've been to a lot of places where there's shared account, and whenever you share the account, you share the risk. And in fact, though, even worse is that it's hard to know who's doing what because multiple folks in your organization using the same account. So you want to make sure you do that. Whether you're using passwords or passphrases, you want to make sure you're using a good policy also. Do restrict physical access to a company system and records. So if someone don't absolutely need to have access to that information, they should not have access to it. So if you have, whether it's your ticketing system or your POS system, you need to set different levels of access for individuals. So if somebody that's working in the front office at the register probably don't need access to the back-end data or how to run certain reports. So that would be a good way to set different levels on that. Make sure that you have a good antivirus software installed on your machine. Do you have a company system and application in place? And then a few more steps here is that you could do ensure that your e-commerce payment system are tested, and make sure you stay up to date in terms of all the policies or any updates that's received there. So, and I won't go through all the list due to time. And the don't list is even smaller. So don't store magnetic strip cardholder data. So that's basically when you swipe a card, that information do not need to be stored. You could process it and then delete that information. And most POS system does that for you, but you could verify that, make sure that that's not the case. Don't use vendor supply. Oops, excuse me there. Yes, don't use vendor card data system in clear text. Whenever you're setting up a new system, make sure you're not using the default passwords. That's typically a case that I see a lot. You want to make sure that you're using more unique passwords and that it's secure passwords. And lastly, I'll leave you with this. This is to get more intel and to get certified PCI compliance. This is the steps. It's a 9-step process that you need to go through. And once you get that, once you do that, the last one is probably even more important. It's an ongoing process to make sure that you are PCI compliance. It's one thing to do it once, but it's another thing to continue to monitor that. At that point, I'd like to open up to discuss what PCI compliance means to your museum. Go ahead.
Here's a question. PCI is extremely complicated.
Mm-hmm.
It changes all the time. It's kind of a self-defeating protocol.
Mm-hmm.
In your museum, are you the PCI expert? Do you get consultants to help you? Do you have a CISO or some kind of data security guy? How can you add this on top of everything else that a tech director or a CIO does? And how do you guys do it? You get outside help?
Well, those steps are outlined there, those steps not only apply to PCI, they also apply to your day-to-day information security. So if you are, if you are compliant with those steps there, you are just halfway there as for PCI compliance. And yes, I make sure I'm doing it, and everybody else that's part of IT are making sure that they're doing that. And as at the end, we make sure that once a year we do an audit, we do a security audit that help us to make sure that we are PCI compliance, that we are following those rules.
Did you have someone from the outside? Because
Yeah.
PCI compliance, and I like to
Correct.
talk about that.
Yeah.
Because PCI compliance is only part technical. It's also physical.
Mhm.
It's as you know, everyone who touches credit card data has to be trained and recertified every 12 months. Your CEO has to sign a letter once a year saying you're in compliance with these kind of things. You have to have cameras if you are storing any kind of data. I mean, it's a very complicated thing that's above and beyond just what you and I can do to segment and VLAN and so for instance, it's bigger than just
Correct, but PCI also, depending on how much credit card you processing per year, will determine what's the level of PCI compliance that you need to be certified at. So as a museum, we have about 1.2 million visitors a year. And I'm certain that probably about like 80% of that is credit card. I'm assuming that some of it is cash too. So based on that, you will know what level and where you need to be in terms of PCI compliance. So in other words, we're not Macy's, we're not Walmart. So those guys have a different, their compliance versus us are different too.
Well, you must be club from your retail and your ticket and your membership. You have to be over 1 million transactions a year. You have to be.
Well, I said 80%. So yeah.
But did you have someone from the outside help, I guess?
Correct.
What kind of person?
We use a company called Crow Physic, I think they call. They are a national company, but there's a local branch to us, and we use them to do a security audit for us.
I'm curious, are you stack level C or
C.
There's a lot you do.
Right. Correct.
Yeah, and that's transaction based,
Mm-hmm.
right? The number of transactions.
Right. And we could talk more about it offline.
But not the certification, not the annual test, not the CEO letter. That you have to do at any tier. It's the camera and the physical security.
Correct.
How do you think this affects your budget? How much do you have to pay for?
The audit we have conducted, and so far we've done it once, and it was about $20,000 just to get that done. But for ourselves as IT department, we did a lot of the work, so otherwise the cost probably could have been well over $50,000 for that audit. We're gonna do it every other year. We're not doing it annually. Right. Yeah.
How do you approach the compromise between security and flexibility when going to PCI? For example, front line point of sale. Technically, under the line under PCI, it's supposed to be a lockdown, single-use workstation with no connectivity to the internet, with no email, no web services, no anything. But in practicality, you can't do that. You need to be able to enable your staff to be able to do to be able to access a gift card online, and then be able to go and give the customer a map, and then be able to check their emails and then get their memo, and be able to run your ticketing system and maybe a secondary system to use some other part of your business processes. And you even if you were to VLAN that all off, then you still need to have access to other systems. And so a lot of your PCI scope or your PCI checks and balances are actually circumvented because you can't actually operate in a single silo.
No, I agree. And we know that accessibility is just as important as security. So what we do is we do VLAN out that network for all our POS and ticketing system, and put the server and the workstation there, and set up certain rules that allow those types of traffic. As far as internet access, they do have internet access on that, but just the way our firewall and most firewalls are set up is that all outbound traffic is allowed, but inbound traffic, we have to set up certain rules on it and to allow that.
It's really a fuzzy logic.
It sure is, yeah.
And also, like, even another thing, like our ticketing system for business operations,
Mm-hmm.
the entire organization has used it. And So your PCI scope, depending on how you interpret it, could be encompassing your entire organization, not just your credit card point of sale. Luckily, we don't store data.
Right.
So PCI also says that you can't take the credit card from the customer and scan it, right? They have to scan it themselves. So you have your card reader sitting up on your desk.
They do. Yeah, they do have that.
Whoever was okay with the aesthetics of having the card readers sitting up on the desk.
Yeah, that's how we always had it set up. That it wasn't changed due to PCI.
Well, that might be.
Right.
Part of the next PCI.
Right. It's pretty complex, but I mean, as a museum, we have to take that approach to protect our customers' data.
We also have to store credit card information for repeat donors. You know, someone who's like a member, you don't want to ask them for their credit card every 12 months when you do a renewal. So it's an impractical thing that we all work our way around. We make little exceptions. We're trying to, but there are things like that. So you know, what are you going to do?
All right.
It is
how we doing?
But you talk about your member management people, they don't want to call up their members in every 12 months and say, you have to give me your credit card again because of PS. No, we don't. CI.
We don't have our screens out.
I think it's an issue. Every
We
12
don't have
months you
screens where they can swipe it themselves.
Oh, you don't?
No, they can't. And I know we go through audits and stuff. All right, you should probably go to the next question.
Right. Yeah.
We'll tell them we'll put all the slides up.
Right.
It's a huge assumption. You surmise that you need to be the card you want.
Not necessarily. It depends on whatever. Our membership management people prefer the convenience for our valued members of keeping their credit card on file, which one way or another, which creates.
Maybe that should integrate it further.
Well, again, it's the practical versus the.
So we're going to move on to our next topic, if that's okay. Next, we'd like to have a discussion with you about how do we actually control unauthorized systems and services. In our organization, we have an enterprise architecture, and this covers off all the official systems that we have for managing information and for supporting all the core processes within the organization. And so it's great to have all these official systems for getting work done. But I mean, the reality today is, and these are only just a few examples, but you're going to find that people around the organization will be increasingly using a range of different services. A lot of consumer cloud services. Sometimes they may give you a heads up. Sometimes they may not. So shadow IT is the common term for this. So how do we handle this as organizations? Should we just sort of block it all at the firewall? Or can we use it as a way to sort of build bridges and open up conversations with the organization? And an example of this then that we've got is just to sort of to give a specific example, we've rolled out a document and records management system over the last couple of years. It's a project that's been it's been quite successful for us overall in terms of being able to get away from the I think it was in a previous session where someone was talking about the information that's lost in email, if you will, and having an official repository in terms of being able to store documents, share documents, and manage information in a more robust way. That's fine and well in terms of the successes we've had with that project, but we've also seen a big growth in the use of systems like Dropbox at the same time. So how can we reconcile the two, if you will, or can we? How do we as an organization handle that? And so I'm actually under a fair bit of pressure, say even from my own team, say with Dropbox popping up and looking at the traffic on the network and concerns about security and what's happening with information, where we should be playing the role of kind of the gatekeeper, the guard at the door, and just cutting off the Dropbox access right at the firewall to be able to manage this. And our IM folks are kind of expressing similar concerns. What are we going to do about all the Dropbox and so forth? My personal take has been to try to use it to then open up conversations within the organization. Okay, well, who's using Dropbox? Let's sit down with them and actually try to build a bridge instead. Let's actually have a conversation about what is it that you are trying to do, what the corporate systems are not supporting. And quite frankly, if you're looking at a lot of collaborative systems, and particularly if you're working with outside people, an enterprise system, an internal enterprise system, is probably not going to cut it. You may be able to maybe perhaps use a service or what have you, but a lot of our core back-end systems do not support the kind of collaboration that people need to do, particularly with outside parties. So we've taken a pretty permissive approach in terms of allowing a lot of use of these services to continue, and we keep an eye in terms of our network traffic and sites that people are hitting, and encourage people to be open about using it so we can have the conversation. It's not without its internal controversy, if you will. But what I wanted to do to the group was just sort of turn it over for discussion in terms of how are each of you handling this, shadow IT and how new services are kind of popping up every day.
Brian, thanks for bringing that up. This is great. I think that users are, embracing all these new tools because of convenience. It's great that I could pull my phone and edit a document from Dropbox or from Google Drive easily on my device and go to my desk. It's already synced to my desk and I could continue working it there. But as IT, it make it very difficult because, when these users leave the organization, those data are gone. We never see those again. And I think when it comes to the IT infrastructure or IT folks, what they're not doing these days are trying to leverage some of these tools, finding out what are the enterprise solutions that would help them with that. And we're in the process of looking at our storage right now, and one of the key questions we're trying to answer is how is it that we could make that data available to our users remotely or outside of the workplace, so they don't have to go to Dropbox, or they'll feel like, I might as well move my data from Dropbox to the network as long as I could access it from home and I could access it from the laptop. So it's a great question, but I don't think there's quite a solution from the enterprise side yet.
There's, we're just by coincidence, the Dropbox issue, I was like, Google Doc, there was part of also what should we use? Because every time everyone's using vendors, we're using multiple different things. And so I gave an intern a project and I said, call Dropbox and find, start there. So that started dialogue. Dropbox could tell us how much space all the clevelandart.org staff was using out there, and it was a really scary number. So I was thinking, now you're going to ask me the number, but it's 35 terabytes, by the way, for the cloud, just to answer that question.
Wait, they pulled all the users' accounts.
They can pull, they looked at, and they could tell you, so because they want to sell you a better solution, yada yada. So they're willing to give you that, but seeing that number was to me really crazy. So the other thing is, we give everybody a museum laptop so that you could take it home and VPN in. But people, of course, have their own Mac at home and everything, and there's this frustration with the staff of, well, why can't we can just use it? You can't use the VPN from those computers, and we discuss like what that opens us up to. And so we are looking at a couple of solutions. They're costly, but how to be able to sort of use your machines to enter our services. So.
I was going to mention your estimate probably other people didn't bother creating corporate.
Oh, right, exactly, yeah, and have their own. No, and that's why it was a scary number, because I was like, these are all people with their Cleveland Art one.
And most people don't want to drop off unless you're trying to get it.
Right.
We had a similar issue. I got the call from Dropbox. They gave me the 100, and I thought, wow, this is the way to solve this is to sign up with Dropbox. And a week later, Hightail called me and says, well, you know, you have over 140 Whitney.org Hightail
Right.
users. And I think there were probably 30 services out there that
Right.
people use, let alone through their Gmail accounts. So I think it's an extremely difficult thing. I thought, well, okay, let's force everyone to use Dropbox. They're not. Most of the young people will, you know, Bill Weinstein said something in the session the other day. He said it feels like a rock in a stream. And I consider that a wonderful thing. I think I don't want to be a bottleneck, right? I want to be a conduit. And frankly, if I'm the rock and the stream flows around me, cool. The stream has a reason. I've got a reason. I don't want to stop people from doing their work, but it creates these security issues. And I don't think there's an answer to this that I can see through technology.
Yeah, well, it's even scary. I mean, I work with so many different vendors, and you're on these deadlines, and da-da-da, and then, you know, they send you a link to something yet new, and I'm opening it up to get it, you know, and I know that here we have opened up yet another service that I never even heard of.
Services like Dropbox center a lot of my business
Right.
accounts, and the beauty of them is one, you can separate personal from the museum. Two, you have control of their, you know, museum Dropbox folders, so that if they need whatever, you can get control of it. Granted, it's not free like the Dropbox that they're signing up for, getting their 2 gigabytes, whatever it is, of space, but it does give you control. And they all have it. Evernote has their Dropbox.
Well, that's why they'll tell you how much people are using it, so that you
trying to sell you,
And your people are using all of these different services.
Yeah.
And it doesn't help that they're now you got to deal with all of them. But if you can somehow mandate everybody use Dropbox, and then you've got to go through, you know.
If I mandate everybody uses Dropbox, and then I'm not there the minute they need me to create their Dropbox, they're going to do something else.
They're going to go do it.
Because they need to get their work done too.
You know, this sort of, we looked at this as well because we work in an enterprise environment, an extremely rigid enterprise environment. And it's like pushing a rock uphill because there are thousands of social media and file sharing and every other type of thing that's available on the net. And to try and control any one of them or control our staff to use any one of them is next to impossible. So what we did, as opposed to trying to control all of this or reduce the security within the network, because we also have secure VPN for those that, especially our historians, they have huge manuscripts, and we're not going to open up an FTP specifically for each historian. So what we've done is we've given them a VPN, secure VPN access using Intrust technology. But for everybody else, what we've done is in certain one of our sections, we set up sacrificial workstations. Literally a workstation that's open to nothing, or to everything. And right beside it is a scrubber system. Both of them are sacrificial. So they can go in, use Dropbox, use any social media, use whatever, pull down files. From there, they transfer it to a memory stick, whatever, run it through the scrubber, make sure that there's no viruses, it's clean, it's good, and from there they can introduce it into the enterprise network. And we have found that that has reduced our security infraction by almost 90%. We've got fewer viruses, we have fewer problems from a bandwidth perspective, and people have actually accepted it because now they don't care what tool they use, we don't care what tool they use, and they're happy because they're able to do whatever it is they were trying to do to begin with.
Go ahead.
Are you not concerned about the USB thumb drive being lost that has your donor list on it?
That's why we have the scrubber system right beside it. So we'll have an open system that has full access to the internet, but completely segregated from our enterprise environment. Right beside it is a scrubbing system where they just put in the key. All it does is check for viruses and ensure that there's no problems with that stick from a security perspective. From there, they can introduce it to their workstation.
They take the stick and then
That's right. So
what
although it's
happens
a
when
little
they
bit
lose their
cumbersome,
stick? What happens when they lose their stick on their way to the workstation and hang your donor list on it?
for us, our staff, when it comes to security, because of the environment we work in, we don't have issues like that. We have very specific secure and non-secure procedures.
I think that's a good point, though, and that kind of
From somebody because you're
when it comes to security, there's no 100% solution. I mean, I'm not implying that.
I'm one of the people that was impacted by the government of Canada losing one of those sticks. Everybody's data that had.
Yes,
Yeah, I don't.
Everybody's iPhone has critical data, and everybody's personal smartphone, everybody's home laptop or computer, wherever they do their work. If you look at my email, there's a lot of proprietary information in there, and it's all over the place.
There's a couple of key things that we've done. I don't think any of us can sort of lose sight of the importance of user education and just repeating and repeating and repeating. So for these cloud services, one thing that we've done is we make sure, okay, if you're going to use them, you cannot put protected information in these services. You cannot like do someone's performance review in Dropbox. That's not cool. For us, it's classed as protected A, because it's personally sensitive information. So emphasizing points like that. So you shouldn't put the donor list, for example, in Dropbox. And we also use a bit of stick as well, in that we have a document repository, and so for managers to expect deliverables to be and documentation to be going in, to expect to be getting links to documents in the system. So something may be produced in collaboration with someone on Basecamp, but those documents have to come into the system and create a cultural expectation that even if working versions are in these spaces, the assets of long-term value come into the system. That's something that we're working on too.
Great. Thank you. And lastly, what is the best password policy for museum? I think we all think that way. Unfortunately, password's been around for a long time, and it will stay there for a while because I don't see anything that's going to replace it. But let's cover what password was designed for. The role of password is to prevent unauthorized access, just like a key is to like your apartment or your home. So a password should be guarded with the same care as a key to your house. The hardest part about choosing a password is that it needs to be difficult for somebody else to guess, but easy for you to remember. Between the two there, it lost its meaning, I would say. Because it's the name, many assume that password was based on of words. But your IT guys will always tell you that never use dictionary words, never use anything that's in your username, so on and so forth. So password itself have lost its meaning to me. So we've been considering passphrase. Password is slightly different, but nonetheless, it's the same concept. You have to type something. But passphrase is a simple, different way of thinking about a much longer password. Dictionary words and names are no longer restricted. In fact, one of the very few restrictions in passphrase is length. The length make it much more secured. Almost anything goes. Restrictions of numbers, symbols in certain places of the password is all gone. You don't need to worry about that. The length is your friend. Password can be simple, short sentences and of phrases or lengths of song lyrics or anything you could think of, because the only requirement is, in the case, is it's the length of it. Using natural language is with spaces, whatever you want to put in it, you put in it. It's basically a happy medium. Password bring into the balance of trade-off between hard to remember but much more secure. In our case, the way we've been pushing it to our staff is that we're not as worried about you telling your next door neighbor or coworker about your password as we are worried about somebody outside doing a brute force trying to attack our network and get your password. So this was interesting. In 2008, when I was at the IMA, we introduced a password policy back then. And we got all sort of emails, and these are two examples. And one was that, is it mandatory that I do this? And I really don't want to change my password every day. And the second one is even more funny, where he said, sorry, but I think this is crazy that we have to keep changing our password. If there are staff that have critical information, let them do it. But for the vast majority of us, this is not the Pentagon. So, and we got emails like this all day from our users because we were telling them to go from, I think we used to have a 6-character password to a 7 or 8-character password we were telling them to move to. And I mean, the resistance was it was incredible to think that, you know, people had secure information out there, but they didn't care the fact that you were telling them that they need to change the password. So password is dead, and users hate it. So going back again to passphrase, we use this website called How Secure Is My Password, and right here you can see on the left a password that's, I think that was 7 characters long, which is a typical password, museum. And as you can see, we're meeting most of the requirement of complexity, which is capital, numeric, and alpha. All that is in there. And for a 7-character password, it would take an hour for it to be hacked. Where when we move to a new password policy, well, this one is a 24. That's outrageous. But right now, what we're introducing to our staff is a 16-character password. And in a case of a 16-character password, it could take a gazillion years for somebody to hack that password. So that's the difference between a password and a passphrase. I'm sorry? A locko?
Lockout.
Lockout. No, we actually increased that to 10. Yeah. And believe it or not, because of this natural, I mean, think of these password examples. I'll go straight down to the bottom there, where you just typing, just like you would be typing an email. Fireworks of Glass is a masterpiece. So you just typing it as natural language. And the security come out of the length of the password and the fact that you're using spaces and so on and so forth, but not the complexity of putting dollar signs or putting numbers, you know, putting exclamation mark, because most of the time we don't forget our password, we forget how we wrote it, how we typed it in. So, and that's where passphrase serve the purpose, because we just typing it. I always tell our users is that use a passphrase that applies to you, something you want to do with yourself. You want to lose weight, think of a password about that, about what you're eating, or something that you want to apply to you daily, to your lives daily, and use that as a passphrase, and it makes all the difference. And those are some of the examples we give when we send out a MATS email to our staff introducing passphrase. And then we made this nice little poster that we posted all around the building that we said password or extent, switch to passphrase, and then we demonstrated what your password used to be and what a new password is, Bucky the Teenager Dinosaur. And I think the difference between this approach when we introduced passphrase versus when we did password at my previous institution is that it's the way we communicated it. We made it more of a game this time, you know, using these nice, using posters like this, and the way we give them some example what passwords should do. And the result was incredible. And I have to say that we didn't get not even one nasty email in this round of password. And so as a result, we looked at it as a success. And we also look at it that we took the approach of securing our environment, but at the same time, getting our users to get involved in it. I will say our CEO, who had a password for Lord knows how long, never changed his password. And in fact, he had a check bag that said password never expired. He embraced this, and he was one of them that changed his to a passphrase, and everybody else followed suit from that. So I'd like to open it up for discussion, and we could talk about not only about passphrase, but we could talk about anything else.
It's funny because we yearly, it pops up, change your password, and we get 20 people who are like, why do you do this? This is so annoying, blah, blah, blah. And I just was looking up the article that came out at the, I think it was in the fall, like that the number one password which is password, had gone to the number 2 spot, and that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 was now the number 1. And then they had a whole list, like let me in, drop 7, but ABC 1, 2, 3 went up 2, and so I thought, well, maybe this is a good way to get people to understand. But you said it's as important as your keys to your house, and I think I put mine under the mat. You know, like it depends. You know what so is it convenience, or is it you're like here thinking, gosh, my house could be stolen. So getting that, I feel still with all, and then even even just the IT staff, the amount of things in the policies of how we change passwords, depending on what area, people have been in charge of those, and we have a way of making sure we have them collected and stuff. But I still think it's going to go to the next method of sort of being able to recognize who you are more than
But we're a little ways from that.
Yeah, I'm surprised no one complained putting in a sentence. Like, I like that, hearing that. I just can't imagine.
What I failed to mention is that our users, they used to change their password every 30 days. And because we implemented this new policy, they're now changing it every 6 months. So every 6 months, and it made all the difference too.
Do you get audited on this? Do your auditors have any input on password rules?
Well, we got audited in July. We did this after the... No, we haven't gotten audited. But it's well proven there as far as... I mean, it's universities are commonplace for passphrase because of that.
Is this supported in normal Microsoft Active Directory logons? I didn't think you could put a space in a password.
Yeah, you can. Unfortunately, Microsoft do limit it to 14 characters, but there is tools out there you could apply to Active Directory to extend beyond 14 characters.
What are you using?
We're using it's called fine grain policy. It's basically going into AD Edit and setting up that policy. So it's a tool available in Microsoft to do it.
Not to be kind of a naysayer, if you will, but I don't know if any of you follow Bruce Schneier's blog. So he writes a lot about IT security and risk and so forth. And he had posted an article earlier this year about passphrases and that modern password cracking techniques are actually combining words as well. And so that this technique, while it's actually going to be like a miles ahead of where people's passwords would normally be, but that even these passphrases are actually subject to brute force attacks. If someone's determined using a modern password cracker, they can actually catch one of these passwords much faster than we might expect. I can tweet out a link to his article.
Yeah, definitely.
I think it's a significant step forward. Bruce talks about a technique that he promotes where you kind of use like the first letter of a longer phrase and work in some punctuation and alternate case and so forth as a mnemonic. But I'll confess, it's a tougher sell, right? And so how do you find a balance of something that you can get people to do versus something that's sort of rock solid and secure? But for anyone that's interested, though, I'll tweet out a link to that article.
Some question: when all of these safeguards fail, or one of them fails, and there's a breach, do you or anyone in the room carry liability insurance around cyber liability, whatever you call it?
I don't know.
There was a conversation in a mailing list I saw earlier this year about that, but I'm not aware of any museum that's actually doing that right now.
Not.
Yeah.
We're looking at it and I'm happy to share with you.
It always comes.
We're going to buy a policy.
Okay.
It was actually, I'm new to the institution. I came from corporate America, so that's part of this. But it's actually our CFO that brought it to me.
The funny thing is when you're going to start looking at your budget, because we do think of those things, and then when you really look at the budget for the year and you weight that, those things in our museum, they can go off to do.
I'm going to demonstrate just how paranoid I really am. Because I'm just curious, how secure is my password site? I've used it myself.
Yeah, but
to do it, what I've done is I've actually exchanged letters and numbers so that I have the same string basically represented, but not what I'm actually using.
Right.
Because that to me is perfect phishing site. And so what I've done instead now is we've for at least the IT department, we just use passkey, and passkey also has one of those the security of your password as well as being a nice repository for that. And then I'm kind of considering the possibility of is there a way of rolling that out to all staff and limiting obviously access, but so basically everybody has their own, pass key that then they can use to check their password against, and they can also use it as their own repository.
I use a tool called Passkey. Are you referring to that little software you could install on your machine and you could store password like a password vault?
Yeah, it's called Passkey.
Yeah. I use that. We use that very heavily in our organization. Well, just for IT to store password and share the main passwords in the building. But because it's not a it's not a web-based application, or maybe that's the secure part of it. I'm not sure how it would be possible to roll it out to users. Yeah, probably.
One other thought about passphrases too. I wouldn't use like a song lyric from a song from an artist that you like on your social media account, if you will. Like someone that wants to get into your organization. And I know we're not like the Department of Defense, right? So let's put it in perspective. But a common technique for hacking is to profile who you're targeting and using whatever is available out there on the internet. So I wouldn't have anything. I wouldn't have a password that's related to anything I've got visible in a social media account.
No, we do have security awareness training. In fact, we did something similar to that as part of an all-staff meeting where we talked about a lot of just things like when you create a bank account, they ask you all these security questions like what's your cat's name and so on and so forth. Those words you use there, just make sure you're not using them on social media, because if they could ultimately answer these questions, they could get into your account. So we try to use that, because I think a lot of time when you talk to people on their personal level, things that they use personal, it applies to them much more than they think about it on the workplace, because they think the workplace, at least I feel that way, they think the workplace is your responsibility. Everything else, like their bank account, they feel responsible for that.
Yep.
Anybody look into biometrics?
Yeah, laptop was getting those. I used to see a lot of Dell laptops with those many years ago. It seemed like it's dying out more than it's expanding.
Actually, we use the biometrics, but for very specific uses. We have one historian who's extremely paranoid about his manuscript, and his manuscript is large, including all the research material to fit on a memory stick. So we purchased ruggedized external hard drives. They're about this big. They're laces, and they actually have a finger swipe on them that works really well. It's USB, plugs right into his workstation, and it saves us an incredible amount of hassles, because this poor individual has a hard time figuring out how the mouse works.
Right.
But he's able to work the lacy hard drive by plugging it in, swiping his finger, and he's good to go.
Nice.
Well, thanks, everyone. We're going to